Welcome back, everyone. Now we're at the highlight of our event, the one we have the most fun with each time we do it. Here we have 4 experts debate how to evaluate and select, in this case, a data observability platform. Now, each of our panelists are experts in the field. They all have a different perspective. So you're going to gain a really quick understanding. It's a really good use of your time of the key characteristics of data observability tools that you need to consider if you're going to buy a product in this space. So it's my honor to introduce our panelists. First, Josh Benaram, CEO of DataBand, Seth Rao, CEO of FirstEigen, Chris Santiago, VP of Solutions Engineering of Unravel, and Rohit Chowdhury, CEO of Excel Data. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm also joined by Kevin and Laura from our last session. They're going to help ask questions. Those be essentially provide color commentary. And as I said, this is an interactive session. So we want to hear from you. And there were some great questions from the last session that we should probably bring over into this session, but you may have to ask them again so that they get into this session. So do that by clicking on that Q&A tab and entering your question. So, gentlemen, you ready? Let's dive in. So first question, let's just get right to the root of it. What factors should data leaders, like the ones on this event who are listening right now, consider as they evaluate data observability products? Who wants to go first?
Why don't you pick one, Wayne?
Oh, you guys. Josh, why don't you go?
Sure, I'll take a stab. So the question being, what should data leaders consider as they evaluate different data observability products? I think the answer I would give to start on this domain and really any other domain is understanding what is the problem that you're facing and who are you solving it for? Because the core issue is going to feel a little different in different teams, and that's going to point towards different solutions, and different stakeholders might feel a little different. So examples of what I mean there, if you're solving for a challenge of maintaining a data SLA of a data product that's being delivered to some end customer of yours, that might lean your evaluation criteria more towards ops-oriented solutions that really cater to the data platform team that needs to manage the overall system. If your observability requirements, on the other hand, are more targeted towards analysts that are internally using data sets, that might point towards different kinds of considerations where a lot of those folks are more oriented towards understanding tables and the health of a data table rather than a full data pipeline. So the first consideration I'd always think about is what is the challenge that we're looking to solve, and who is the team that feels that challenge most acutely, and starting from there. On the actual product level, there's considerations that I would take into account, like the type of metadata that's supported, the type of tools that you're integrating to and what you use to run your data stack, and what kind of alerts that a system like ours is distributing, and who those get routed to, and what is the content of those alerts to help find and remediate issues.
Excellent. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so you can see everybody more clearly. So who wants to follow on? Any other thoughts?
Hey,
I could take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Should I? Wait.
Jump right in.
All right.
Don't be
So I want
shy.
to add to what Josh was saying. I would preface it with 3 questions: what, where, and how. So when you're evaluating data observability products, the question is, where do you want to observe? What do you want to observe? And how much do you want to automate? So the reason these 3 are important is because the vendors who provide the tools line up differently depending on what the question is. So when you say where you want to observe, and if the answer is Snowflake, then there are quite a few vendors in that Snowflake space, in the data warehouse space. But if the answer is a data lake, then it's a different set. It's not the same group that does that. And if it's a pipeline, it's a different group as well. And the next question is, what is it that you want to observe? If the answer is I am content observing the metadata, then you have a different group of vendors. And if you want to observe the data itself, then you have a different group. And the third question is, how much do you want to automate? Depending on that, your SMEs are going to have either more or less workload on them. And the different vendors out in the marketplace have automated different pieces of observability. So my suggestion is don't think about boiling the ocean, trying to get everything all in one product. You will just get an average product for all functions. It's good to have a lot of flexibility. When you're thinking of a tool, think of it as individual Lego blocks that will connect with other blocks in your ecosystem. So it's always good to have these individual Lego blocks that are very powerful, very capable, and have a lot and have very deep functionality in one space. So that's the way I would think about it.
So Seth, first, is there any way you can share your video? You might not have been aware that you could do that. There's a little button at the bottom.
I think my video is on from my side.
Yeah, I can see him.
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
I see Seth's video.
Yep.
All right. So I guess I'm not seeing it. So just Seth, one quick follow-up question. Does that mean companies are going to need to buy multiple data observability tools if each one's monitoring a different piece of the pie?
I think the market is evolving. Each of the vendors here on this panel have done something very unique and specialized, because the problem is a very broad problem. And if each of us tries to do everything, it's going to be hard to have a world-class product in that one thing. So ultimately, the product will evolve. There will be some coalescence. But right now, the solution, my suggestion is, if you have a very specific problem, ask, how can I solve that very specific problem? If you want to try to boil the ocean, you will end up saying, I just need an Oracle or whatever else. So you'll have an average of everything, not the best in one particular thing.
Great, thanks.
Just to answer that question, Wayne, about different solutions, I actually know of customers that we have that use us and at least one other service of people on this call now. So in large organizations, I would definitely see different data observability solutions being leveraged, just like you would see different data, or rather general observability solutions being leveraged. You might see APM and cloud infrastructure observability and solutions. So there's enough diversity of need at the largest companies in the world that I think there's a good case to bring in multiple. Smaller companies, mid-sized businesses, startups, I think that's where it starts to get a little tricky to justify, and where you just want to pick a solution based on where the gravity of your needs are.
One thing I just wanted to add on this conversation, all very valid points. We're focusing in on the stack and trying to solve the problem. One other angle, which is also overlying too, is what about like the business itself, right? So business observability, somebody's funding this, right? So there's hundreds of thousands of business metrics such as revenue, costs, transactions. How are we going to track that? And more importantly, how are we going to measure that, right? So, as we're deploying new observability platforms out there, what is the as-is state? What's the to-be state? How are we tracking that? So we can measure and accurately say that this is actually bringing value. We're also seeing a lot of folks bringing in a lot of FinOps teams, right? Who are really there to really, not only make sure that the pipelines are working correctly, but also just really a focus on making sure and governing, where cost is going, controlling those cloud costs, seeing where the money is spending, who are the biggest spenders, so on and so forth. So that way we can identify opportunities to optimize the environment and overall reduce costs, if that's what people are going for.
Well, we'll give you a chance to chime in now.
Yeah, I was at Gartner yesterday, on their 3-day data analytics summit. And I don't think there's like a bigger exhibition hall So if you just think of it, if you just step back and think of, how many of those vendors will exist next year, or will we need like a bigger exhibition hall, and will we need to, split it into two? And if you just bring it back to, let's say, the SVP of platform engineering or a CDO today, just consider the kind of complexity that they are dealing with. They're buying data platforms, and they're, being pitched by every single vendor who was out there exhibiting. So I was actually, I just took a step back yesterday and I said, thank God I don't run engineering, and thank God I don't run data platform engineering anymore, because it is so confusing out there. And I think, one of the things that we need to recognize is that, the purpose of observability is to actually simplify everything that data leaders have to do. And as long as we can keep our, eye on that particular objective, I think, the selections then become very easy. It depends upon, I think I partially agree with, some of the comments made earlier. The way to think about, a selection of a platform I would basically look at two things. One, what is it capable of today? And what is the roadmap? And what is the capability that it will bring? And what are the use cases that it can support? Because, observability can mean many different things. It just depends upon whether your data and analytics and machine learning and AI capability and maturity model fits the offering that the product provides you today. If you're like a small company, if you're a startup or an SMB, and you have a data engineering team which is of 5, 10, 20 people, then I'm sure that many of the point solutions will work. But if you really think of large enterprises, the global 2000s, they're dealing with a complexity which is much greater and much higher, and they're probably a little more evolved in terms of their own thinking about the data analytics space. They're not looking for an observability solution because they could not solve some of the problems that they got. They're looking for a solution because for them it is prohibitively expensive to run the platform and to build the observability solution. So I think it depends upon who is the buyer and what challenge are they trying to solve and where they are in their own data journey. Most of our customers today, they're extremely large users of data. They support multiple businesses, collect data from several different sources, and for them, these problems are not entirely separate. They look at it, the whole thing together, which is that pipelines are nothing but abstractions of business processes. Infrastructure failure slash cost results in poor quality of data, and the end objective is to get data into the right hand. So each of these objectives are like very closely tied together for most of the large customers who deal with petabytes of data at scale.
Okay.
So
Let me bring in a question from the audience that's related here. This goes, yeah, from Lori. She talks about how scalable, but she also says, well, who integrates all these tools if we're talking about, multiple observability tools and integrating observability with your platform? Any comments on that?
That's a tough one. That is precisely the problem, that you don't have enough data engineers to deal with your data problems today. And now you're asking, the data leaders to, invest in multiple data tools or observability tools. So instead of actually helping them solve the problem, you're actually handing them more problems. So I think, to my earlier point, I think it's important that you buy one platform that does many of these things. You may implement it in different ways, to what Seth was saying earlier. I think it's useful that where is your problem most acute today? But the answer to the acuteness of the problem cannot be found in a limited platform. So I would say one, preferably self-serve, something that actually gives all the problems away, or at least solves it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let
And I
me
would-
Folks in
add
the
to
audience,
Rohit's
I
comments.
just want to remind you to submit your questions so we can bring them into the conversation here. Sorry, I'm sorry. Who was speaking?
So let me add to Rohit's comments. He's very right. The complexity is going to increase as you have more and more tools in your ecosystem that you need to integrate. Now, that said, there are a couple of ways to solve that complexity. One way is you have a single tool that does a whole bunch of things. And the second way is you have multiple tools that are a lot like Lego that you can block on very easily. Now, I listen to music when I drive in the car, and the music usually comes from my phone. But I am not looking to buy my phone from an Acura or a Ford or a Toyota. I'm looking at a separate set of vendors for that. So the reason is the ability, they have become like building blocks, and you can very easily plug it into each other. So the complexity is definitely something you have to keep in mind. And if I depend on a Ford or a Toyota or a Honda to innovate on the phone business, it's a much harder problem. I'll have a clunky brick that's not going to be super innovative. So it's a combination. Complexity is definitely an important issue. Interoperability and connecting to the different tools in the ecosystem is another way to solve it. So that's something that buyers should look at.
Yeah, and just to add on the previous points there, I do think, yes, I mean, we also got to think about the tools that customers potentially have at their arsenal today, right? I mean, there's going to be some out-of-the-box monitoring platforms that are out there. But yeah, it's going to be up to the user, the support staff to correlate all this information. So yes, I mean, is there a platform that does everything? I think that's what we're all here trying to solve, right? But I do think that having a single pane of glass, I think it's important for folks, so that way it's reducing time whenever stuff does troubleshoot or fail, and really making it easy, and making a purpose-built platform that's really specific for the data teams that are on this call today.
So let's bring this down a level into the real world. I was wondering if each of you, if you want, could describe a customer or an organization that has implemented data observability and had some positive results.
Yeah, so I can start off.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So we actually, one story that comes to mind is we're working with UBS, which is a large financial organization. They made a very heavy investment into the Databricks platform, and at their scale, they have thousands of users, tens to hundreds of thousands of data apps that they're running per day, and they were facing multitudes of challenges. One, since Databricks was very hot service for these folks, they were bringing in, there was a lot of new users that were coming in, but they were also faced with the ability for just understanding where cost is going, and they pretty soon they were facing some very significant cost overruns, to the point where they started bringing in some professional services to come in and really help fix that problem. The challenge with that is that, that's a very, very reactive state, right? Being able to just, continue to manually try to address these things, you're never going to get out of that state, right? So they did bring in Unravel. And so some of the things that we were able to bring in is just overall, where are all the bad behavior? Where are all the bad pipelines? Why are things failing? What are some of the things that we can do to address it? We were able to do this at a scale from an automated fashion, right? So not doing these things, very reactively, but looking at all the jobs that are being submitted, and really essentially picking like the top 10, the 15, the ones that were really providing, the most significant resource overruns. In terms of just overall just forecasting, it was a crapshoot, so to speak, for the folks to really just try to understand, how are things trending? Because yes, we do need to be mindful of cost, and how do we do that if the users are consuming up resources in an erratic fashion, right? So, having an observability platform that's looking at just things overall, but then also providing some ways to help optimize that, really helps in terms of forecasting. So, the organization itself can really understand how our true cost trending, and really have a handle on where things are going from that standpoint. But the biggest thing is, I think, is having some observability at the job level for the users, right? And so with the folks that were coming in brand new, bringing in some of their, their data pipelines, maybe not having the best practices because they were new to the environment itself, having some insight in there to actually provide this, just across the board really helped have those conversations with the folks that might not have been doing the best practices, or maybe, giving them a better reason as to why some of their pipelines continue to fail. Really upskilled them, right, to make sure that they're being better data stewards, I guess. But most importantly, just getting out of this reactive fashion and just being a little bit more predictable about, how the job should be running, have a little bit more, most of their jobs hitting more of the SLAs, and ultimately just improving the overall experience for customers, all through just having an observability platform.
Anybody else?
Hey, when we work with an extremely large fintech company, they serve about 350 million daily active users, and this year they're on the way to processing about $1 trillion, on their platform in low value peer-to-peer transaction. And for the last 3 years, we've been working with them, monitoring end-to-end their OLTP, which is the transactional systems, the OLAP, which is the reporting systems, their machine learning systems, and their streaming systems together. And in addition to just giving them exceptional SLAs and SLOs, we've also managed the entire data quality that gets through the entire supply chain of data. And just imagine the scale. If you were down and out for like an hour, it would basically cost you about $100 million of transaction at their scale. And in the last 24 months, they've not had a single S1 incident across their infrastructure or across their data layer or in their business pipelines. So I think there are many benefits. There are other use cases that we can talk through as we go along, but I don't want to hold this conversation moving forward.
Yeah, that's terrific.
So do you want me to chime in, Wayne, or do you want to go to the
Sure.
next question?
Sure, don't be shy. No, go ahead.
So so the question was successful data observability programs at our customers. A couple come to mind. The one that's high on my radar is a retail customer. And they have hundreds of thousands of IoT devices, and they process huge volumes of data. Global presence, over 100 plus countries, high volume of data constantly streaming in. And on a weekly basis, they would have data issues, something like 80,000 to 100,000 alerts that something was wrong somewhere. That's a pretty massive number of alerts to be dealing with. And at some point, you got to say, okay, I got to stop the pipeline, or something is okay or not okay. And that has serious implications. They brought us in, they implemented DataBuck, and out of the box, using our ML algorithms, DataBuck was able to immediately point out differences between false alerts and actual alerts that they should be looking at. With over 100,000 alerts a week, it becomes very hard for the team even to focus their attention on. And the real alerts actually costed them a significant chunk of change. You multiply that by 100,000, that adds up very, very fast. So the thing that made them successful was twofold. One was not wait till the point of consumption to validate the data. So they moved that upstream. And the second thing that made them, that helped them a lot, reduce their risk and their cost, was to be able to automate a big chunk of the observability using machine learning. So huge reduction. They were able to cut down their cost by over 50%. And the alerts to true alerts, so therefore the alerts went down by over 80 to 90% was cut down by catching it up front.
That's a great story. Josh?
Yeah, when I hear this question, I think about not just the great things that DataBand delivers to our clients through the outcomes, but I'm thinking about the patterns that we see across really successful clients that do an exceptional job in implementing and getting value from our solution. And probably I would apply this to other data observability services as well. And I'm thinking about, in particular, one company that we work with, which is a very high growth scale up. It's a exceptionally advanced data engineering and machine learning engineering team. They work in the CPG retail space and build computer vision models to help detect images on shelves of retail stores for different kinds of analysis. But I think about this company in the view of what are the patterns and ingredients that led to their success. And we saw a great outcome in deploying to this organization where eventually we had a direct line of sight of how we were actually increasing the revenue of this business by helping them deploy more models. But the patterns that I see there and could probably apply across our other clients is, first of all, we deliver to the data engineering team, right? That is the core unit within the company that we're working in. And what I see as commonly successful is that unit understands their role as service providers to data consumers and to the business. So in data engineering, this team already, when evaluating DataBand, they had mapped the needs of the scientists and the analysts and understood what blocks them from being productive in terms of the data that they need. So they already had a good reading on what are the critical issues that are preventing good flow of data to the business. The second pattern there was this data engineering team understood how their work directly tied to the outcome of their business. So for them, as an ML intensive org, they knew the more models they create, that leads to more clients they can support and therefore more revenue that their overall business makes. So our objectives quickly became, how do we help them create more models? Right? How do we help more models get to the field? And that was a really key KPI that this team used to measure their success with our platform. And then the third, I think, third characteristic of this team and a pattern is they had very clearly defined SLAs for their data product, in their case being machine learning. For them, they needed contractually to provide something like 95% accuracy on their machine learning models that their data pipelines then needed to support. So there's always that line of sight of how well are we doing in the data engineering team to meet the SLA and to deliver to the business. And I think those are patterns that we would want to see repeated across different clients, and hopefully we can coach folks to get there as well.
Wayne, I think you're on mute. There we go.
Yeah, I was just telling the speakers to mute if they're not speaking because we're getting a little feedback, but I forgot to unmute myself. So don't forget to unmute. Kevin, Laura, do you have any questions for the panel?
So I'd love to follow up on, I thought, insightful comment from Rohit in particular about the those poor data engineers. And I'm sure we have heads of data engineering teams on the call here. But that role, I think, is going to be charged with implementing a lot of these data observability programs. And I think the burden that's being put on by the business to manage data delivery to handle this explosion in data supply and demand is challenging. I'm just curious, as organizations are taking your solutions and putting them to work, what techniques are they using to make sure that the data observability program doesn't overwhelm? Ease of use is obviously critical here, but in the end, in a lot of cases, you're increasing workloads and job descriptions.
Yeah, so if you think of it, Kevin, when we first did, our webinar about 2.5 years back, my suggestions were very simple. I don't think, anybody will remember that. But, we had a few suggestions that, what is your surface area really? And where are you experiencing most of the pain? I think that continues to be the guiding principle as to where people start implementing. And, it also goes and ties into where you are in terms of your data journey, because a lot of customers are still dealing with, structured, unstructured, log kind of data and with very expensive data compute and data processing systems. I think if you just took a step back and to my earlier comments, the way that I've really started to contextualize this is that, today data leaders are tasked with 3 different objectives. One, which is owning the technology. Second, owning the team. And finally, delivering data to the business. And these are like all individual areas. Hiring, retaining talent is very, very hard. And so is the selection of technology in this, the optionality that exists for people to go and do the same thing in 20 different ways. So the typical thing that you would want to do is to basically certify or to establish a platform or a practice in which some core pieces have to exist for a long time, and the rest should be either fungible or replaceable with little or no effort. And those would essentially be between options of SQL versus several dashboarding tools to programmatic interactions with data. I think those three patterns are very, very difficult to break. You will have programmatic interaction, you'll have SQL, you'll probably have a lot of ingestion. The key is that, can you monitor this entire pipeline? Can you look through, through a single pane of glass, and can you find out that, I am getting visibility into what is coming into my data system or data ecosystem, what is acting on it, through transformations, and who's consuming it, and are they happy with that consumption pattern? I think that would be the bare minimum that I would basically look at from an observability standpoint. Otherwise, it again puts the burden back on somewhere else that, yes, I did put a brace on my knee, but, my ankle started hurting because, I was just supporting the ankle. So I think there has to be like some measure of sort of equality and parity in considering, who are we helping and who are we hurting.
Great. We're getting a lot of good questions from the audience. So I want to insert one here, and then we might have time for one more question after that. So this is from Jeff from ADP. It seems that a lot of the conversation around tools is geared towards more structured data. How are these tools incorporating unstructured data, if at all? We have petabytes of unstructured data, and this discovery and usability is paramount to the overall picture. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can answer that. Let me take that question up. I think any organization today will have to deal with structured and unstructured data together. When we speak with, let's say, a Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have like mainframes on the left and Azure Synapse on the right and everything in between. Somebody bought it, put it in production, and these technologies are not going to go away. I mean, the lack of structure is what is putting so much pressure on these data systems, data leaders, and the unpredictability that exists. And is it going to go away? No, it is not, because data exchanges are going to happen through different systems, different kinds of companies, and it's not actually going to reduce at any point in time. So one of the fundamental things that we did, and I know we are a little short in time, we actually said that what are the different kinds of data sources? There's basically data in streams, and therefore they have to be observed in streams. You have to observe files when they land, and that includes, files, tables, different kinds of formats. If you are actually a data provider, which is, let's say that you were somebody like a Dun and Bradstreet, you're actually taking data from 140 different markets. You can't expect all of that data to come in one format to you. So it's basically GSRL version 1 all the way to GSRL version 7. And in that, there's no structure. So you're basically harmonizing all of that data and trying to create a structure so that your eventual consumption will work. And I think the opportunity lies there, that you have to shift left your entire thinking in terms of how do you make your data and analytics systems much more efficient. So I think, the best tools, they actually cater to the unstructured data lakes as well. And we're very comfortable with a 100 petabyte data lake today. We are able to process and give insights at the level and value that we should.
Great. Well, listen, we have time for one more question. This is going to be a speed round, so I'm going to call on each of you. And the question is simple. In 30 seconds or so, what is your product's biggest differentiator in the marketplace? And let's start with Chris.
Sure. All right. So, here at Unravel, we look at things a little bit differently. Rather than categorizing observability solutions into vertical buckets, we think about what answers different teams need to their questions at various stages of their workflows. Specifically, in our case, the data ops lifecycle. We found that such data ops observability cuts across 4 flavors. Clearly, deep visibility into how the different applications are interdependent on one another in a data pipeline is a core component of data ops observability. But so is the ability to control the cost of these applications in a cloud environment, and be able to understand how missed SLAs or performance issues impact company revenue. The best of traditional APM observability tools do this well for web apps, but data apps are a completely different animal with different competing paradigms, different classes of problems that have different types of causes and different remediation. Unravel has that depth of granular details horizontally across all components in the modern data stack, as well as vertically from application to infrastructure and everything in between. That allows us to have that full picture so we can apply AI to get those crisp and prescriptive recommendations on exactly where and how to optimize for performance and cost, identify root causes automatically, assess workloads for cloud migration, et cetera.
So it's not just data observability or data pipeline observability. It's a little bit of application observability and a little bit of IT operations observability. So you're vertically spanning the markets. Okay, got that.
Yep.
Josh, you're up next.
Great. So I think from a business level, what makes us feel a little different is we have this maniacal focus on improving time to detection of data incidents and time to resolution of incidents. It's a very operationally oriented focus within our system. And that'll feel different compared to other services in our space in data observability, which might lean more towards analyst users or data science users downstream. We have this very, very tight focus on the core data engineering and platform team. And what makes us feel different underneath that focus on a product level is a few things. First of all, there's a balance of metadata that we capture, which is informed by the needs of those central data ops teams. So this is pipeline performance information, it's data quality information, it's lineage information. There's a balance of information we're collecting based on the things that drive the SLAs within those teams. Second thing is we have open integrations that we use to enrich the metadata that we capture and that we use to integrate to just the core pipeline services and try to cover the most important areas of the tech stack within those data teams. And then the third area is how we aim to surface alerts in ways that fit the needs of that operations unit. So trying to get incidents detected as soon as they actually occur within the pipeline, in the ingestion stage, in the lake stage, in the warehouse stage. We're trying to detect these incidents in real time rather than look retroactively at data as it's sitting in these databases, which might be too late in the flow and already be affecting downstream.
Great. All right, Seth, you literally have 30 seconds, so please be concise here, and then we're gonna finish with Rohit.
Sure. So what's different about our product? DataBuck is a unified metadata and data observability tool for any location in your pipeline. It is autonomous, uses machine learning to quantify data trustability, starting from the lake, through the pipelines, to the warehouse, to the point of consumption. It reduces risk and cost simultaneously for getting good trustable data. It is completely open API designed, and it enables self-service for the business user to see how to get trustable data themselves without depending on IT.
Interesting. Excellent. All right, Rohit, you get the last word in really 30 seconds.
Your word domination, Wayne. That's our differentiation, right? We do all of that. That everybody says. No, we've taken a platform approach, and we serve all different layers. I think one of the unique things about Excel Data is that you don't have to look for another tool if you've implemented it. We've built a lot of IP around identifying issues in your infrastructure, identifying issues of your cloud costs, making sure your resources are optimized when you're on-premise or on private cloud, and finally, that your business processes work really well. So end-to-end solution.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'd love to thank our panelists, Josh, Seth, Chris, and Rohit. Thank you for all your insights. And I know most of you are heading over right now to the breakout sessions. So you can start getting over there. And we're going to take another 5-minute break. If you haven't already, go view the schedule, click on the schedule button, and you can sign up for one of these 5 breakout sessions from our data observability experts. So with that, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.